Welcome and peace and blessings be upon you, dear viewers of Horn of Africa TV. This is the 8th program in the Somali edition. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, our viewers and supporters, for your likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions. Our hosts today are Janai, Rodas, and myself, Mohammed Mahmoud. We're very excited to have Professor Mohammed Hassan Ali, the political advisor to the head of government in the Somali region of Ethiopia, commonly referred to as Western Somalia or DDS, Dawlad Deegaanka Somalia. He is also the honorary president of the Horn of Africa channel and an expert on the affairs of the Horn of Africa. Our topic today is the new Horn of Africa, consisting of Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Sudan and South Sudan, as well as Kenya. The opportunities for peace and development, as well as the obstacles or challenges to progress in the Horn. Professor Mohammed Hassan, thank you very much for sharing your precious time and knowledge with us, and welcome on the program. Please let us start our discussion with questions from Rodas and Janai regarding peace facilitation in the new Horn.
Good.
Professor Mohammed Hassan, again, thank you for coming and for your time for this discussion. And my first question is going to be, as we know, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia signed a tripartite agreement. What really led those countries to sign a tripartite agreement? And how do you think it will improve the economic and political conditions among those countries and the broader strategic and regional implications for the Horn of Africa?
Thank you very much. This tripartite agreement, it is an embryo for the bigger vision of the Horn of Africa. It's just a starting point. It is an agreement of goodwill that 3 states for the first time gathered in the capital of Eritrea, Asmara, and they have signed a sort of memorandum of understanding. This memorandum of understanding, it is psychologically, socially, and even sentimentally, it is the feeling of all the people of these 3 countries want to have peace. Second, to guard their peace collectively. Third, that they can cooperate in all the terms, whether from economics, social, and other elements. They can work together, pacify the region, remove the region from the last 60 years conflicts, which was deliberately engineered in a sense by external forces. It's also, this document is telling, yes, the region is going to start a new journey whereby there is no historical antagonism between the states and the people of the region, and we can reverse the previous 60, 70 years always that it is creating contradiction among these states and people that have to be reversed, and it have to start on the basis of the paternal, brotherly, and sisterly relation in order to enhance the economy and the social condition of all the people in the region. The third very element also, it is this agreement is echoing that it is an embryo level. It is true, it is signed by the 3 states, but once it is materialized and becoming stronger, it can also enlarge other states, the Sudan, both Sudans, probably Kenya, even it goes until Uganda, that it is by building together a common road, a common economic relation, and so on and so on. This agreement is not merging, it's not based on the political merging of all the states, but it is in the understanding is to remove war and conflict among the countries which we have mentioned earlier, because the conflict among them, it was a fake, and it is in fact, it is externally engineered. if you see the contradiction in the past, it was possible to resolve it. There was no need to go to this very long journey of conflict and marginalization. It's possible. Rational people, they can sit in the table, discuss, acknowledge, and so on. But the biggest problem is that it is not the state itself who are engineering the war, that the external forces who want the conflict to remain for very long time because they can divide and rule them. They can create or use this contradiction to support one against the other, and so on. The main purpose of it also, of this agreement, is it expands that to make a peaceful coexistence among the people in the region, and it passes also among the Red Sea Basin and the Indian Ocean. In that sense that it is, we want peace, we want to work together, and we want to also to defend our peace, whether it is in the Indian Ocean, whether it is in the Red Sea, and also to protect the natural wells, which is already not used, but it remains in that area peacefully for peaceful purposes. So it is this multiple contradictions which we were facing in the past, this have frightened external forces, the tripartite agreement, and if it succeeds that it will extend into the both Sudanese and even Kenya and Uganda. In the long run, even Tanzania can be included in this economic base. If there will be a railway, will be highways, will be open, goods and services will be open. And the best example of this is the Ethiopian Airlines, you could say. The Ethiopian Airlines, with this agreement, it is flying all the states of the region. It flies twice to Eritrea, it flies several times to Mogadishu, it flies to Kenya, flies to Uganda, it flies to Southern Sudan, it flies to Northern Sudan, and so on. So if you take this, the symbol of Ethiopian Airlines, which is now flying in all the states, and Djibouti, of course, and so on, that can be translated in all aspects of the economy, aspect of transportation, aspect of the relationship, the social structure, artists, musicians, and so on. They will be integrated together, produce a new type of music and so on, which creates an atmosphere of confidence building among the population in the region and pacify the region. This has frightened the center of imperialist forces, seeing that this is an embryo. If developed, it will be against us, which will never be against them, of course, but they don't want that it's such kind of idea, because the Horn of Africa, the greater Horn of Africa, absolutely in their domination, and their strategy and what they have adapted for the last 60 years, 70 years, is to divide and rule, intervene in favor of the other. This is like the American film, the bad, the good, and the ugly. They just put logos in a groups saying this is the bad one for us, the other one is the ugly one, the other one is the enemy, and so on, by putting tags and so on, and making the region absolutely dependent. The second important chapter is, if this region became stable and the cooperation will continue, it have a boomerang effect. The boomerang effect that with our neighbors, brothers, Arab countries, which is not very far from us, there is only a very small river between us and them. It will have a boomerang effect also, that probably we can deal with them equally, with economic sense, with social sense. We can provide a lot of things, because they are our brothers and sisters, our neighbors. We lived for 1,000 years together, we knew each other, our psychic is the same, and so on. This also frightened the far robbers, and they wanted to maintain the old way in our region. So they were looking for a sort of the weakest link and try to reverse the situation. From this, it comes that they say, let us use this ragtag warlord type, even though they are very primitive and have no any socio-economic project for themselves and for their people, and let alone to the whole of Africa, and let them come into conflict, that you create a sort of demoralization by creating a war, make the people panic. You could see now the recent propaganda from CNN, The Guardian, everybody. You could see how the interest of the region, how the region is very important for them. So the campaign, you see the false conference now they put in a very small hall in Washington to say they are establishing now a new transitional government in exile and so on, to inculcate on the people of Horn of Africa in diaspora to create a mass base, and so probably is the intelligence service of them who's doing. So one have to understand is that it is also the panic from their point of view, the relative decline of American imperialism in the world, and it is the situation is changing to be the era of Asia. These two, a conflict of the two, one is a declining empire, a declining, in fact, in a fastest rate, and its hegemony is collapsing everywhere and is declining. And the new economic system is growing in Asia. And if you look at the First and the Second World War, it is the same kind of character what had happened. The unification of Germany with Bismarck, defeating France, going until France and defeating France. And then not only they defeated France, they have taken two provinces from France, Alsace and Lorraine. And then Germany already, before it is unified by Bismarck, before it is unification, where there is a lot of German states in Germany, they did the first expo of machines. That is in 1851, the first machine expo which has happened in London. That it is, at that moment, experts say that it was the best machine was produced by Germany. See that Great Britain dominating the whole world, living as a parasite, but dwindling it is her scientific development, the rise of German industry, a modern industry with a special speed, everybody was seeing it. Then the German unification, which was all German people wanted to unify Germany, and it took a very long time, the conference in Frankfurt, but it is British imperialism was infiltrating and making sure. Now you compare it with the Horn of Africa. Britain knew that the rising power would challenge her will be Germany, the German unification. The German states, they had their own discussion, like in Somalia for a very long time now, 30 years, their own discussion that it is, they opened a sort of a forum in Frankfurt. Frankfurt is the smallest German state. So what they did is that they were discussing how to unify Germany. And Germany, of course, it had different states, it's not unified, and it have also two divisions. The biggest one, Borussia, and the other is a Protestant, and Bavaria and all the other area is Catholic. So the contradiction Britain was using, this religious contradiction among the German population, which is among Germany, which is the Catholic, the Bavaria and the South, and the Protestant. And of course, Catholic and Protestant had also, before the modern time, their own contradiction and war. But the British strategy is to adapt as a stepping stone the Austrian state, the Austrian Empire. The Austrian Empire led by the minority Germans, dominating all the Slavic people, at the same time is a very fanatic Catholic state. So her influence in the South, particularly Bavaria, Munich, and all this, when an agreement was reaching, always she is the one, she was breaking the agreement of the Germans, and it delayed the same situation what has happened in the Somali history. Always when they come together and they wanted to agree, somebody comes in and breaks it again. And then it starts reconciliation and so on. The German history proves, but at the same time, Germany from inside was getting stronger and so on. And as I have told you, in 1851, they were the best machine producers relatively than France, and relatively in comparative with Britain is the biggest imperialist force, even Britain. Finally, when Germany is unified, and it is Bismarck, but he forced the others, and the others, he bribed them, and he created this Germany which you see. And finally, he had to defeat the Prussian troops. It went until Paris and defeated the French government and even took land from them. From that time, that the German unification and the contradiction between the British imperialist force on one side and another, France was frightened by German growth. Then finally, one was declining, another one was growing, and this brought the first inter-imperialist war. Germany says, I have a very big stomach, I want more slaves. And then it was the issue of the Ottoman Empire came. Germany demanded Agadir of Morocco. Germany wanted to dominate or to have colony of Tunisia, which the French and the British refused, and so on. And the First World War we have seen. The Second World War also was the same character, in a sense that the Soviet Revolution have changed and defeated the Tsarist imperialist, Tsarist Russia, a feudal, capitalist state, the emergence of new type of state and new type of economy. Then the imperialist forces and the imperialist bourgeoisie got very much frightened, and it gang up and created a civil war. And that civil war, which ended in 1922 in the Soviet Union, they killed 10 million Soviet citizens, and they have destroyed total economy, even the industries exist. That's why in 1922, Lenin, he have to create a new economic system, which is called the NIP, the New Economic Policy. One step forward, we did, but we were defeated. Now we have to do 2 steps forward in order to be strong. Now to come to our connection, I'm giving this as a historical thing. We did 1 step forward. 1 step forward after 70 years. 1 step forward, which brings all these states. So here you see the intrigue of the forces who didn't want this tripartite agreement to be realized. When this immediately was signed, one of their technique is not because they admired that there will be peace. Immediately, the so-called Nobel Peace Committee gathered in a very fast straight, and they selected one and they left the other. They gave Dr. Abiy a Nobel Prize. This Nobel Prize, it is a very bad spice to contaminate the relationship which now is developing between Asmara, Mogadishu, and Addis Ababa. It's not true. So they thought maybe we can win the heart and the mind of Prime Minister Abiy, and we try to bring Prime Minister Abiy in our side. But the process continued. When the process continued, Prime Minister Abiy also, Dr. Abiy was committed to this agreement, to whatever he signed. Then it frightened them. And then they start thinking a rollback, a rollback to the old situation. What does it mean? If you have a carpet at home and then you wanted to remove it, you have to roll it back because you cannot remove it like that. A rollback. And that rollback theory, which they have adapted before in Central Asia and other places in the Korean War, now they turn it toward us. And this rollback is, they say, we have to defeat Prime Minister Abiy. They waited and so on. They tried all type of tricks. Then Prime Minister Abiy was overwhelmingly elected, which solidified the tripartite agreement. This also frightened them. Finally, of course, they have to use their puppet and their mercenary of the mercenary organization TPLF to disturb the region. And we have seen now the last 2 weeks, the propaganda, the CNN, the Guardian, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all hung up. Addis Ababa is surrounded. Dr. Abiy fled away the country. The same propaganda what they did in Syria and Libya and Iraq and so on, what we know it, they continued. But to tell you the truth, that they are defeated, they didn't succeed. Their delegation came to Addis Ababa now. I think they left last night and so on with empty hand. The firmness of the people, in fact, it awakened the majority of Ethiopian people for resistance against the bandits and external forces. This also solidified the tripartite agreement again in a higher basis. The other thing is very important. What it happened is the antagonism, the false consciousness which have been created in Ethiopia. Somalis and Eritreans, that the enemy of Ethiopia disappeared from the mind of the population. Most of the population, 70% of them, they are your age and so on. They don't know about this thing and they don't care about this thing. They are better educated than the other generation. So this hate and contradiction which have been created and in their factories and outside, it have also disappeared. So we could say now the tripartite agreement, it is really solid now on the ground. Solid in a sense, with all it is this, still we will have some difficulties, we have to combat, we have to fight, but the tripartite agreement, it is a solid and it will remain to stay there for a very long time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor. With regard with regional integration, we have witnessed that delegates of all the three countries, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, signing tripartite alliance with the aim of strengthening the region peace and development. But my question is, how this should expand to collaboration between people in the region, for example, at the community level, in order to facilitate the peace and the regional integration purposes?
Very good question. It is at the community level, the first, after the agreement of this tripartite agreement, the first thing on the ground was put in is that the resuming the relationship, the diplomatic relationship in a solid sense between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Somalia, of course, it is there. What does it mean when you resume the diplomatic relationship, which have been cut for a very long time? The visiting of His Excellency Comrade Isaias Afwerki, of the President of Eritrea, to Addis Ababa, that is, he visited it several times. The symbolic thing you have to see, when President Isaias arrived to Addis Ababa for the first time, the reception made for him is nobody in the history of Ethiopia had such kind of reception. This also gives a very strong signal to the enemies of the tripartite agreement, because their ideas is always they have to inculcate antagonism between Eritrea and Ethiopia and antagonism between Ethiopia and Somalia. That demonstrates the visiting of the President Isaias, it breaks it into pieces. All people in Addis Ababa and all Ethiopians, kilometers, standing and shouting, President Isaias, President Isaias, President Isaias, Isu, our brother, our friend, and so on and so on. This, the atmosphere, that echo of all the city, it really depressed the enemies, which later on that agreement came. That you have to take it from that simple point, symbolic point of view. Secondly, that it is Eritrean embassy with its all, it was re-established in Addis Ababa, and the president himself, he had opened and so on. And now the Eritrean communities in Ethiopia and in Addis Ababa, they can function freely as community. Imagine these Eritrean communities yesterday was harassed, chased away from their properties were taken from them. They have to live incognito and so on. That situation is broke. Now openly they can make their own meetings. They meet among themselves. They celebrate their holidays and so on. It is also a step ahead. It is. You have to see it. It is part of this the tripartite agreement, which is later on signed in Asmara. So the psychological makeup and all Ethiopian people, it have to change it, that there are committees of Eritrean community in Gondar, Eritrean community in Gojam, and so on and so on. That's what you could see now. The hate that bandits TPLF had, from that point of view, they went to Desi and they killed a lot of Eritreans. The same Eritreans who have been chased away and came back. And so the hate of TPLF to kill them, to go, these are civilians, have nothing to do with war situation, to knock to their door and to kill them, it is the hate they have and their masters toward the tripartite agreement and the peaceful process we are developing. So this also now, it will enhance with a new level, in a new level after the total demise and defeat of this ethno-fascist TPLF, that it is, we will celebrate in our street, all of us together with a higher level, with a higher speed, that it is the speed of the train will become higher of the integration of the tripartite agreement. So the enemy tried to put a stone in our shoes that we cannot walk. No, on the contrary, we can run now. That it is, we can run in a higher speed. The situation in the region will be much brighter. To give you one thing, one of the elements when you say, what does it mean, this tripartite agreement? What does it mean, the change in Ethiopia in concrete? The TPLF regime, it had put in a lot of what they call it in Amharic, Kela, blocking stones within even the Somali region, within the Oromo and so on. What does it mean? If I am a businessman and I bring goods and I want to bring it to Addis Ababa or other region, because of the stops everywhere they have put in, I cannot bring it easily. Sometimes even they will confiscate it from you. In a way to block the economical integration between the periphery and the center. One. Second, to loot the resources of the others by putting a lot of blocks which have no meaning in economic sense, have no meaning and so. But they don't want the integration, even the normal interlinking among the peoples, to be stopped and controlled by them from above. Once these bandits eliminated, that also economic blocks was eliminated. So in that sense, you could see, for example, the Somali businessmen from the Somali area going to other areas and so on, making business, it really enhanced it very strongly, and they were doing the business with others. You can't imagine that when you look the taxpayers' documents, you see that the contribution of Somali businessmen and women increased in the fastest rate. In the past, somebody was stopping them, somebody was stopping and looting their property. That situation also have disappeared, which means that soon also in the other regions will be like that. And this also will enhance the economy of Ethiopia and later on the economy of the region, interlinked, as I have told you, like the Ethiopian Airlines flying, this also flying on the ground, that the economic integration will be stronger. And this is what it frightens them. We have to always understand that the external enemy, not necessarily because they dislike our face. It's not because they dislike our face or our names or our color of our eyes, at the former Prime Minister, the TPLF or the Tigrayan fascist organization, when he said that it is Eritreans have to leave, even if we say that we don't like your, the color of your eye. No, 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 no. These people, when we analyze them, not the TPLF, the imperialist forces, they have contradiction with the population of the region and the region itself. Not because they hate us. Not because they hate us. Imperialism is a robbery system, and they wanted to rob. And we are saying no. And we developed this thing. So imagine, here I will make some anecdote. And I want all young people to read this book, Noam Chomsky. His best book, it's called Power and Ideology. This is his paper, which he have presented it in Managua script. When Nicaragua overthrew, the Sandinista overthrew the semi-fascist regime and established a progressive state. And he explains here, the ideologue at that moment of the American imperialism, his name is Cannon, George Cannon. He writes about it. George Cannon says, in 1947, after the end of the Second World War, he published in the Foreign Affairs on the US policy maker, how the US view the world. And then he says, we are only 6.3% of world population. Now they are 4% of world population. We consume, he says, 50% of the world wealth. Imagine 6.3% of the world population, that's in 1947, and they consume 50% of the world wealth. And then he says, for us, democracy, human rights, and so on and so on, it's irrelevant. We only use it when we want it. Our purpose is not to make the gap small, our purpose to make the gap bigger. So nobody should have an illusion. And he made the same speech to the State Department. Forget this human rights, woman rights, cat rights, whatever. We just use it when we need it, he said. Our purpose is not for human rights. Our purpose is to enlarge the exploitation. We are eating 50%, then in 20 years we have to eat 70%. So that policy continued, and they have destroyed even the economy of the United States by waging constant war, Korean War, Vietnam War. By 1970, United States in 1950 had 60% of world GDP. Today it had only 18%. So they spoiled American taxpayer money. They destroyed inside America and so on, because this parasite class who are ruling that place behind the screen, it's not the Congress, or it is not this who is ruling, that the rich 1% who own the biggest economy and the biggest firms and so on, the military industry, the oil industry, and all this, they are sitting from the back, and they let this Democrat election, Republican election. These are really a theatrician. They are theater they are making. They are irrelevant. Those who are ruling, they are behind the curtain. And they are the one who, the system is working behind the curtain. It developed a propaganda system and so on and so on and so on. Therefore, we and our sons and daughters must be clever. Clever in a sense, you have to read correctly. You have to understand how the world functions. It's not our mistake if we fight. We fight because they will arm somebody from us. They will tell him a story of that he will get wealth and so on, and he will turn against his people, become a warlord and so on, and destroy a lot of things. For those, they're selfish warlords, who have no vision, who doesn't understand what's happening around them. they can be very dangerous. We have to raise their consciousness. Therefore, my conclusion here is the tripartite agreement in Asmara, slowly like a turtle, it reaches this area. The purpose was to kill it, but they are not able to kill it. They are not able to overthrow also the government of Dr. Abiy. And the younger generation now in Ethiopia felt the patriotic sentiment, whether it is outside or inside. They saw that this is a humiliation against their country. They are putting a stumbling block against Ethiopians to work hard and develop. So I think all this conflict, you see, all this war, you see, this the support of the Tigray ethno-fascist and so on by imperialist forces, European and American, is to kill these three. The second point is that what they have created in Somalia. The same they wanted to topple also President Farmajo. All the crises they are creating in Somalia. They knew that it is Somalis are one people. They speak the same language. They have the same psychological makeup. They have the same culture. They have the same religion. That everything what unifies them, it unifies them. So they impose on them federalism, which is a fake one. Federalism in such country doesn't work. And then now is, since President Farmajo came, the state building was growing and the people of Somalia becoming very conscious because of Somali people have been dispersed all over the world. The business people also, they became stronger. Now they dominate Kenya and so on everywhere. That the confidence building among the population is increased and the demographic condition of the Somali people also changed. In the past, majority of the population was rural. Now the rural population is declining. The urbanization everywhere is increasing. Urbanization brings also another type of psychology. So all this the imperialists knew. Once President Farmajo was there and is trying to build the state structure and things is going, and now is going, so they said this man is very dangerous. Second, the imperialists discovered a very big, huge wealth in the region, particularly in the Indian Ocean, on the ground, and so on. Gas, petrol, and so on. Somalia had a lot of also minerals, a very strong agricultural capacity and livestock, and so on. A very big fishery wells, and so on. The awareness because of the increase in Somalia and so on, the young people becoming sophisticated, educated, and so on. The elderly, those who sees the world in a very narrow way, have passed away and became old, and they are becoming redundant politically. This frightened the imperialists, and of course that they wanted to topple one of the signatories of this tripartite agreement, President Farmajo. So in a way, you create crisis in Ethiopia, try to topple Dr. Abiy, same time try to topple also President Farmajo. And if you do that and you bring the puppets, then Eritrea will be isolated, that it is the link, the center, the Mecca of the tripartite agreement will be isolated, and then maybe they wanted to disturb Eritrea by the greater Tigray ideology with remnant of Eritreans who are from the Stone Age, who consider themselves their opposition. They might arm them and so on and fight Eritrean government. But that is not possible. The time is over, and the feeling of the population and the feeling of the young people, Eritreans knew how to mobilize outside and so on. They isolated these elements who are nothing and filthy, who have no any vision to themselves. They are just literally mercenaries. And as I have told you, they have tried everything on President Farmajo. We hope that he will come back. that he will mobilize as much as possible. And then, of course, now the defeat of the ethno-fascists in Ethiopia. And I'm sure now this war will end up, and then the tripartite agreement will be strengthened, and then it will bring a big change in the region. This is the way I see it. I just recently came back from Kenya. I have been for almost 3 weeks there. I talked to a lot of people in Kenya and so on. The Kenyans have no any antagonistic sentiment against Somalis or anything. First of all, there is a lot of educated people there and so on. When you take also Kenyans, they were against President Uhuru's view of this false contradiction he is creating with Somalia, even though now it had ended up at the courts in The Hague. But the Kenyan people, they asked me, and they say, what's happening in Ethiopia? They understand it even better to a certain extent. And they knew that it is an external instigation. The last point is that, of course, the European, first of all, Europe, particularly the imperialist European Union, it's a parasite who lives on Africa. And they consider Africa is their backyard. And they wanted to keep Africa for themselves. When the European Union Foreign Affairs, a Spanish guy, when he met the Russian counterpart, he told them clearly, don't intervene, Africa belongs to us. He's a Catalan from Spain. Spain itself is a subsidized country by German imperialism. So these small countries like Norway is not a member, but Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and all this. These are small rats. The country, the smaller it is more dependent in the bigger imperialist country, and it needs also, the smaller the country is, it wants also to exploit her workers in a much bigger, and needs also exploitation of the African continent. So they are so frightened. They don't want to do business with Africa. They want to loot and steal from Africa. And Africa, in 60 years, the young generation have changed, and so on and so on. It is not like our grandfathers that they don't know how the world is, they don't know the map, they don't know anything. They can tell them whatever they want. When they came at that moment, they could say they have just jumped from the sky, and then they have been sent by God, because that is why they became stronger. And so whatever they can tell to our grandparents, but they cannot tell to our sons and daughters now. A lot of education is accomplished. The final is in the name of fighting China. All this campaign they are doing, they say we are fighting China and we want to remove China from Africa, as if Africans have no right to decide about themselves. That's all.
Yeah. That was actually very insightful and leads quite well on to the next section. So there are several challenges to peace and development in the New Horn, including external influences that are somewhere on the spectrum from destructive and divisive to mutually beneficial and progressive. We also have various internal conflicts or internal divisions being used and exacerbated by our enemies, as well as current conflicts. My question is related to the current conflicts between Horn African nations, as well as the internal conflicts. How can we move past this to a more peaceful future, conducive to development and progress, and throw away the chains of colonialism?
First of all, as I have said in the beginning, there was never been a conflict between the states in the Horn of Africa. particularly the last 3 years. Since the tripartite agreement is signed, there is no war happened between Ethiopia and Somalia, or the government of Dr. Abiy, before in the time of the TPLF. TPLF was sending small weapons there and there, inviting the Somali warlords, trying to divide them and so on, and this, destabilize Somalia. That situation doesn't exist anymore. That it have disappeared. TPLF doesn't exist. TPLF is overthrown, and the government of Dr. Abiy is not busy of sending weapons or sending this and so on. That is. Second, the Somali region in Ethiopia is the most peaceful one, and the most, in fact, you could say the most progressive one from any other regions of Ethiopia. So with this kind of situation, there is no now a serious antagonism between Ethiopia and Somalia. That is that. What we encourage to the Somalis is that to look back to their own contemporary history and why they have put are in this situation, and they have to develop their own internal reconciliation and their own internal. The economy, I have visited Somalia. The economical conditions is integrated Somalia. The market is one. But those parasite elements wants to continue like this, still they are dreaming to continue like that. And that's why they are against Farmajo. But history have decided on them. They cannot stop the new historical development inside Somalia. It will merge, whether they like it or not, and most of them, they will disappear because the demographic, I said, the demographic condition of Somalia. When I was in Somalia, the demographic condition is that more than 80% of the population, whether it is pastoralist or semi-pastoralist, and they are in the rural areas. The cities, Mogadishu, when I left, it had only 500,000 or less than 500,000 population. Later on increased to 600,000. Now it's 3 million. Every place where you go, the demographic condition, that the urbanization had increased. People have been exposed. A lot, more than 1 million Somalis are outside in the world, and so on and so on. So it is, if you see in a lot of things, even they are enhanced that it is the only country where have no currency and it's paid by SMS, and so on and so on. Their banking system and so on. Now they need a state. And the pillar of this state is the building of national army. And everybody is afraid of this building national army. The national army is that, as any national army, all young people from different regions, from different houses, they can come in one camp, know each other, and so on, develop a comradeship relation and so on. They are the embryo of the nation. And what is now, since President Farmajo came, the national army, the national police, the judiciary, and so on, gradually is building. So Somalia is not going backward, Somalia is going forward, and nobody can stop that. That is a factor. Ethiopia is going forward, but it is new change of her and democratization of her, that it is people to know each other and so on. Not only Ethiopia have removed the old policies that it is to be used by the imperialist forces as a police of the region, other nations in the region. That policy is dead and it will never come back. The process is no more is that. What you have to study that in 3 years' time that there was no any conflict among the states, neither Ethiopia and Somalia nor Ethiopia and Eritrea. And the contrary, that it is almost now 1 year ago, on the 3rd of November, when the TPLF ethno-fascists attacked the national army, which is stationed in Tigray, and killed several thousand of them in order to grab the weapon and everything and so on. And then big part, the army ran away to Eritrea. The Eritreans who have received it, paid it, and so on, rearmed it again and sent it, and even defended it. So that contradicts it in reverse. Now, if you wanted to say the unity of the region in reverse developed. So there is no antagonism now among the states. I travel freely in all these states. Nobody has stopped me. I am a citizen of the region. So there is no, we have to work, we have to be vigilant, we have to mobilize our youth, we have to raise the consciousness, and we have to eliminate and isolate the parasites in the name of opposition subsidized by external forces, whether they are Eritreans or Somalis or Ethiopians. We have to fight them as much as possible, and we have to fight them with a good brain. We have to analyze them. This, they have no project. They don't have even project for their own family, let alone to have a project for a nation and super other nations. So I have a very big optimism. Yes, life, it is up and down, but it is the history direction tell us that it is the future is bright.
Thank you, Professor Mohammed Hassan. I think this is going to be my last question in this part one. So you kind of like touched it or discussed it a bit, but I want you to focus more in the interest of the region. So the question is how the interference of global big powers competition is impacting political insecurity dynamics in the Horn of Africa region. But the main question that I want you to focus is like, what is their interest in the region? Like, how is it affecting?
The region, first of all, if you add them all, it could be about more than 250 million people.
Mm-hmm. So
what?
Yeah.
What made? Why they have intervened since 1840 in China? China didn't invade them.
Mm-hmm.
From 1840, the first Opium War, the British and later on the other imperialist forces who have attacked China, until the 1949 independence of China by Comrade Mao Zedong, million Chinese died. There is no people who suffer like Chinese. We didn't suffer like Chinese. If you look a little bit on the history of the Chinese, in the capital city, in the second capital, the business capital, Shanghai, 1920s until 30s, until independence, daily 30 to 35,000 Chinese peasant families die in the streets of Shanghai. The municipality of Shanghai had a department called to bury the dead, which have trucks and everything and so on. 25,000 daily. Chinese, they were dying like flies. But they fought back at the end. They fought and they got their independence and liberated, and today where they are. Independence, prosperity, and so on, it doesn't come as a gift. It doesn't come because you people, you live in diaspora and you send to your parent $100. You don't solve a problem. Problem will be solved by serious struggle and making the nation state independent and the region independent. In our region, they are using one group against another group. And they have succeeded for 70 years. Our consciousness rise now. We know that it is because they don't want that we cooperate, our children cooperate, our grandchildren cooperate. Our main enemy is the external force. There is no enmity among the people of the whole of Africa. Our language are similar, our culture are similar, our faces are similar, our psychology are similar. What is the difference? In fact, having all these different language and culture and so on, and diversity, it's a richness by itself. They don't have that. We have it. We have to be very proud of that. That is a richness. It's not a weakness. So we should struggle to cement this tripartite agreement to higher level. As I have told you in this book, which now Chomsky published, and I want you to read, and make publicity. It's the only good book he published, I consider. The Canon, the ideologue, he explains how to control Europe. I wish that you read it and then we can have a discussion about it next time, that we can make a sort of a lecture based on discussion. I will say two things before I wanted to mention this. I'll give you another example. Egypt, when the French Revolution happened in France, Napoleon wanted to Egypt. They have seen the Egyptians. There is a new development is coming. Egypt was ruled for 400 years and something by a class called the Mamalik. Mamalik means the previous slaves. Muhammad Ali, a person of an Albanian origin, a tobacco businessman, he overthrew the Mamalik after he saw of what the French Revolution did, and he created the modern Egyptian state which you see today. Muhammad Ali says with his slogan, I will say it in Arabic and translate it for you. لا خير لأمة تأكل مما لا تزرع. There is no hope for a nation who eats from what she doesn't produce. لا خير لأمة تلبس. There is no hope for a nation who wears from what she doesn't produce again. That was the slogan of Muhammad Ali. Finally, he reformed the Azhar University. He created the first steel industry and so on.